I pulled out of your project at 50 Bowery because someone alerted me to your greater plans in the neighborhood. You also mentioned several times how your intent was to raise property values and eventually turn over multiple blocks of Chinatown. Ooh. I didn't speak out at the time because that's your prerogative as a landlord, but it is not mine. I did not want to bring Bauhaus to your block and raise property values and be a gentrifier. Oh, shit. I think it's comical that you mentioned I attended your wedding as if it should provide you a shield from criticism. Fair point.
Fair point. Yep.
That's not how I operate. I know you reached out to several of our quote unquote friends, and I'm glad you all had a chance to catch up, but I don't need to profit with you like they are. I get my shit done on merit, which is a novel concept to someone who was born with immense power and privilege. You're sitting on boards with other out-of-touch Asian American Ivy Leaguers promoting this vision of an elevated institutional Chinatown. You don't understand the value to the nasty bits of how culture works like a virus. How could you? There are a lot of people whose consciousness is paralyzed by privilege and circumstance. Xanax handcuffs, if you will. It doesn't surprise me.
He is a lawyer.
It doesn't surprise me that in the deal for the jail, the board you sit on at MOCA secured the $35 million in exchange for support. It doesn't surprise me that you think it's progress, and it doesn't surprise me that no one on that board stopped to look around and say, so many businesses are closing in Chinatown. 35 million.
Lucky Boys Podcast.
Didn't Eddie Huang and someone from MOCA have some back and forth on Twitter where it was public?
Yeah, about the...
So you're aware. Okay, what happened there?
Well, I think he was talking about the fact that Jonathan Chu, the property owner, was not being honest about the business dealing that he had with them, because he was going to open up a restaurant down here, and the characterization of it,
was Eddie Huang right? Did he had his information? Norm, can you look that up? Can you see the back and forth on that? So we're in here. I'm sure we don't know all the details.
Yeah, no. I mean, hey, look, he's got nothing to lose. Why would Eddie wants,
I remember reading, he was saying, Eddie Huang, hey, you were at my wedding. Why are you like calling me out publicly on social media? And Eddie Huang said something to the effect of like, just because I was at your wedding doesn't mean I'm not going to speak up when you do some douchery. Right.
Exactly.
Norm, you got something there?
It says here, Eddie Huang calls out area landlord Jonathan Chu for shielding NYC mayor's plan to build a 29-level jail in Chinatown. So yeah, he was calling him out on that.
Okay, can you get the details of what they were saying to each other?
Yeah, I got to look it up. So continue.
So it was because of the jail,
MOCA.
the mega jail.
Right. That MOCA's got the $35 million from the city. And
Eddie Huang didn't like that. So he called Jonathan out.
He didn't like it because it was pretty much, selling out the community, right?
Is that true, by the way? Jonathan did take money?
Well, he's the board. He's
one of the board members. Jonathan Chu is one of the board members. And Eddie Huang is basically saying that he claims that de Blasio bribed Chu and MOCA with $35 million to sell out the community, basically.
And what was Jonathan's response on social media? Because I know he did.
I'm not looking at social. I'm just reading an article right now.
It was so long ago, I forget. But I think he was trying to take it offline, and Eddie was like, "Nah, I'm calling you out."
All he said is it was just offensive and dangerous.
Jonathan said this is offensive and dangerous accusation.
Yeah.
And
all this is nonsense.
So he basically called Eddie Huang a liar.
Yeah, basically.
But I mean, my point is that Jonathan Chu or the other people can, speak out and say, hey, are we really solving the criminal justice reform by putting in this building? Right? Is the damage it's going to cause to a community worth it? Right? Is it worth it? Is there another option? Why do we have to choose between, putting yet another institution, causing construction for years here, that might not result in anything positive for the very people that you propose to help. But meanwhile, for sure, I think the damage to Chinatown is beyond just the putting a building, taking away resources from the community. It's letting all of us know you don't matter. you are invisible. Your community don't mean shit to me, right? We can do whatever we want, right? Screw you for your achievements. All of that stuff don't matter.
Maybe from the point of view of MOCA and Jonathan Chu, it was like, we see a bigger picture. Like, for example, like when we were talking, I take this as an example, wherein I think Jay-Z was working with the NFL, and then you had Colin Kaepernick, he was protesting against police brutality, so he was taking a knee, and Jay-Z came in working with, and he had a lot of flack for working with the NFL, because you're just taking money from the NFL doing what? It's all about money. But, Jay-Z is saying like, what's the point of just taking a knee? That's not going to help anything. Why not build programs to address this? So that's why I'm working with the NFL. So he's kind of taking it from a position of I'm looking at the bigger picture by working with this organization. So maybe that's it.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, like I said, I'll leave that to the smarter people. But the reality is, they're not building a jail in San Francisco where it's taking a knee. It's nothing permanent there that are damaging to the community. There's a difference between political positions and something permanent that reminds you that we are willing to spend more money for people in jail than people in Chinatown. That the seniors sitting in Columbus Park playing there, who has been displaced because the fire in 23 Mott Street, the old PS23, that the city's willing to put $1 billion there, but don't want, and the only people they give money to is $35 million to MOCA, and then a couple of $1 million to the senior center next door, just to pacify the community.
Which is nothing.
I got something. This is on Eddie Huang's Instagram. So, and he said, responding to Jonathan Chu, also MOCA NYC, would be great to get transparency on how exactly you were able to secure that $35 million in the deal for the jail, and why you think in a crisis era for Chinatown that you, above all the people suffering, deserve those funds. Please enlighten us. At NYC Mayor, what do you have to say?
It's a valid question.
This was back in December 4th, 2021, when he posted this. But he basically put it all on Instagram. And let's see, Jonathan Chu says to Eddie Huang, to say that you blindly sharing this flyer is offensive and dangerous is an extreme understatement. For years, I've ignored the nonsense and vitriol that toxic groups with special interests have tried to drown our community in, while targeting volunteers, individuals, and private citizens like myself. I am responding to your post specifically because we're friends and acquaintances. You attended my wedding, were my guests on multiple community fundraisers for Apex for Youth and MOCA NYC, and you know my family has history of investing and creating jobs and opportunities in Chinatown. If something has changed because the project we worked in good faith to achieve didn't pan out, then have the courtesy and decency to talk to me, the sources, the fact check, before blindly sharing and amplifying misinformation. You are an influencer with a major presence that private citizens like myself will never have. You went to law school, Eddie, so you know better than this. I tried to reach you yesterday directly and through mutual friends, but you have left me no choice but to respond to you here. You have my contact information, and whenever you're prepared to really get... And that's where, hold on, let me see. Okay, so that's where he cut it off at. So it looks like Jonathan responded back to Eddie Huang after trying to reach out to him. And he's basically accusing Eddie Huang of feeling salty for having some type of collaboration not pan through. So Eddie Huang goes, at Jonathan Chu, I pulled out of your project at 50 Bowery because someone alerted me to your greater plans in the neighborhood. You also mentioned several times how your intent was to raise property values and eventually turn over multiple blocks of Chinatown. Ooh. I didn't speak out at the time because that's your prerogative as a landlord, but it is not mine. I did not want to bring Bauhaus to your block and raise property values and be a gentrifier. Oh, shit. I think it's comical that you mentioned I attended your wedding as if it should provide you a shield from criticism. Fair point.
Fair point. Yep.
That's not how I operate. I know you reached out to several of our quote unquote friends, And I'm glad you all had a chance to catch up, but I don't need to profit with you like they are. I get my shit done on merit, which is a novel concept to someone who was born with immense power and privilege. You're sitting on boards with other out-of-touch Asian American Ivy Leaguers promoting this vision of an elevated institutional Chinatown. You don't understand the value to the nasty bits of how culture works like a virus. How could you? There are a lot of people whose consciousness is paralyzed by privilege and circumstance. Xanax handcuffs, if you will. It doesn't surprise me.
He is a lawyer.
It doesn't surprise me that in the deal for the jail, the board you sit on at MOCA secured the $35 million in exchange for support. It doesn't surprise me that you think it's progress, and it doesn't surprise me that no one on that board stopped to look around and say, so many businesses are closing in Chinatown. 35 million divided by 200K is 175. You could, many businesses are, hold on, the way I'm trying to pick it up from where he left off on the next page. You could have created 175 grants and distributed 200K each to struggling small businesses. These aren't difficult concepts to understand if your heart was in the right place. All that the protesters want is for Chinatown's leaders to step up against building the jail, save Jing Fong, a cornerstone of Chinatown, and examining the distribution of that 35 million. If you want to be leaders, step up. If you fail, let's get a better redistribution of the 35 million the city has set aside to pay off Chinatown elites. MOCA is a shell of a museum that only attracts 50,000 visitors a year, while the tenement museum in nearby LES attracts 250,000. If you really care, hold on. All right, next page. If you really care about what MOCA is teaching, maybe take one of those 200K grants, buy every kid in Chinatown a copy of Maxine Huang, Kingston's Woman Warrior, Yellow by Frank Wu, and ABC by Jean Luen Yang. Those books are all slightly more effective than the programming at MOCA for significantly less cash. Damn, drop the mic on that shit.
No response after that.
Well, I'm just on Eddie Wang's Instagram. Okay. I don't. If something happened there, I don't know what was the outcome of that.
No, I mean, we're talking about MOCA. Let me show you a little bit. This is something that I work on directly. So when I was in company board number 2, the Bowery Savings Bank, where Capital is now, right at the corner of Bowery and Canal. Bowery Savings Bank closed, right. They closed, and then they were going to sell that building for $2 million.
To Capital?
Yeah, that building for $2 million. So, and someone said to me, I'm on committee board number 2 at the time. He said, why don't you approach MOCA, since they're looking for a building, to see if they're interested in buying it. I went to them, talked to the executive director, and one of the board member, and they said that Mario Lin doesn't think that building looks Chinese enough, or something to that effect. And I'm like, wait a minute, that was the excuse they give. 2 years later, it went to $2 million to $6 million. And that time, someone was coming in to where Capital was the one who bought it for $6 million. And the board, again, people said to me, can you talk to one of the nonprofit? Is MOCA interested in this? And if they are, we would rather have them own the building than than a club. So I went back to these guys, and they turned me down a second time. They had a chance to have their own building. For the record, twice they turned it down. And I even said to them, at that time I was with Computer Associates, and I said, I'm pretty confident that if I go back to Charles Huang, the CEO of CA, that he's not going to buy the whole building for you, but he will be very interested to make a donation, contribution to support this. So MOCA had a chance. They just, they turned it down.
Norm, what are your thoughts on it?
Like I just mentioned, how maybe Jonathan had the bigger picture.
So you think it's, I can't help the poor if I'm one of them, so I got rich and gave back to me. That's a win-win. And again, that's a Jay-Z line.
Yeah, I think he's coming from a very filtered point of view, Jonathan Chu. So he's looking at it like exactly how Jay-Z is looking at it. It's like, I can't help the poor, I can't help the community if I can help myself. But when the community is yelling out and doing these things, and they're saying to your face, to MOCA, that this is wrong, that he's not listening, I also feel for the community as well. I think you have to listen. There has to be a balance. You have to listen to the community, what they want, and not just think what they want.
So
That's my point of
you
view.
think Jonathan's looking at it, like if I were to use an analogy, sometimes the kids want something and they don't know that it's not good for them, but the parent knows better. So you feel like Jonathan knows better since he's privy to more information
That's possible, and
and connected. So
but I
then
don't-
he feels like he can only help Chinatown.
he knows better. You're basically saying.
So you think he's coming from that point of view?
Yes,
like,
I think
like
he's
a
coming from-
parent's love, it's tough love.
I think he just knows better, but I don't. Doesn't mean that he has the right vision for it. You get what I'm saying? So you could be a parent and say like, okay, I know better for you because I've lived all these experiences, but does that make the parent right? Not
Sometimes.
necessarily.
I mean, we're simplifying it.
And I think MOCA and Jonathan Chu, since they held such a pulpit for making this decision, they should have let the community as well have a say into what that should have been
Well,
done.
maybe-
But
what
do you
should have been
think
done.
that would be a situation where there's too many
Cooks in the-
bosses
cooks
and
in the
not
kitchen?
enough chiefs? Yeah.
This is a big decision. You're changing the community. Why not have the community involved in these talks?
I think it's like an approach, right? So if you think at what's MOCA, what was it about? Is it just a bunch of people who are socialites and just that
Right, elites.
in that elite, right? In their mind, it's like, okay, I'm gonna teach my other white friends and my other privileged friends the story of Asian American stories, where people in the community is like, no, you can tell our story a different way. You don't have to tell it the white way. You can tell it a different way. It doesn't have to be.
So you feel
this glossy
MOCA is
building.
giving the white version of Asian history?
I think that goes back to our earlier discussion, right? If they're born into privilege and that's their experience, that they believe, hey, I learned from going to these museums, so I'm gonna teach my friend. That's the way my friends will understand. So in their social circle, that's fine. But I don't. So maybe if Jonathan has spent more time to really understand the community that he's supposed to be, that he's interested in supporting, then he'll learn something. That there are other ways to do it.
Yeah, I think when Eddie Huang responded, was that the fact, like, was there any alternative motives for your decision making? If this is in fact of helping the community, then why not reach out to the community and make sure that every voice is heard, right? And I think that was Eddie Huang's approach.
Right. It's the only way that we're going to tell our Asian American story history is put up a $135 million building. Is that the only, then what people are we attracting to talk about this?
Not
Right?
people in the community.
Are you going to attract more people who's going to continue to fund you guys? Or are you really get people who really would make the difference? Because the people, most of the people who are perpetrators of these anti-Asian hate and all this stuff are not the,
Not the customers.
and again, I'm not saying you shouldn't reach out to your broader
But,
audience.
but wouldn't it be the foot traffic that they did? For example, if they had times where schools, class trips, field trips to the museum where they see something like this and learn something?
That's not where they're getting the money from.
But what the students
No. What I'm saying is that wouldn't you attract that type of foot traffic, for example, from if you have all these different public schools, right, all across Manhattan, or from perhaps even different boroughs? Like, hey, you do field trips to the New York Stock Exchange. You could do field trips to an Asian history museum, right?
Yeah, except the difference is that when someone Google that museum, it comes up like, okay, this museum's here because they got $35 million from the city for putting up a jail in Chinatown. That's not part of the history that we want to talk about. You make that
It's
become the
tainted.
living history of your building. And I think, all the immigrants who believe in this country, come to this country, didn't come in and say, let me get the biggest building, right? We started with talking about coming here, giving the kids an opportunity. Putting this jail up there, it's closing the opportunity.
Lucky Boys Podcast.